vigil was titled Unity and Hope. It was promoted as a rally to bring the community together from all walks of life, all religions, all political affiliations, to pray, to sing, to heal, and to meet new friends. To heal together over the horrible, senseless September 10th, 2025 assassination of Charlie Kirk. A man who was only weeks earlier said, "I want to be remembered for the courage for my faith." That would be the one most important thing. This man was assassinated for discussing hard topics with people who had opposing viewpoints. With respect, honesty, and courage, I am here today to advocate and honor him by doing the same. On September 13th, I contacted Mayor Williams to ensure we did this visual by the books. He was pleasant, caring, and he was honest. He noted, if we are not asking for exclusive use of the park, it is within our First Amendment right to gather within the park for a vigil, and we would simply need to inform the borough office. However, once we contacted the borough and the Wayne County Republican Committee backed our event on Facebook, the stipulations, intimidation, and threats began. I will now read a documented list of what occurred after the borough was contacted. I was heavily discouraged by the office from having the event because there was a non-local left-wing protest being advised on the same day. But it was still within our First Amendment right to gather, so we pushed on. On October 19th, a Homestead Borough police officer entered the Wayne County Republican Committee headquarters after being called for an individual defacing private property. When the officer arrived, he was more concerned about asking the elderly volunteer if she had anything to do with our visual and to relay the information back to the organizers that they cannot have the event without a permit. The officer also proceeded to tell the volunteer that the Republican Committee vigil at headquarters planned for the same evening must stay inside and not able to overflow onto the sidewalk. Please, I hope this body camera footage is available to the public. Hearing all this was in stark contrast to what was originally stated about our First Amendment rights. To seek clarity, I proceeded to call the borough office to confirm. The borough stated an agenda item was placed on the borough town hall meeting for that coming Monday as unauthorized use of the park. She noted she was relaying a message and that we must keep walking every 10 minutes or we would be told to disperse. You could hear the disappointment in her voice and that this directive was not from her. I was devastated that having an event that protects my First Amendment right to promote open and respectful dialogue where everyone was welcome would receive so much pushback. The organizers and I, who are simply community members, were frightened. Would we get fined? Would we get arrested? We didn't know. We were put into a position that we had to defend our First Amendment rights. On Monday, September 22nd, 2025, the day of the borough town hall, I was shaking from nerves as I am right now. Walking into the building with my 9-year-old daughter because I couldn't find a sitter that day. When I looked at the agenda, there it was, all the way at the very end of the agenda, unauthorized use of the park prayer vigil. Prior to the meeting start, I was noted that Mr. Hamill was the individual who placed the item on the agenda. We shared with Mr. Hamill this was our First Amendment right, and even though it's to honor Charlie Kirk, it was not politically driven, but faith-based to create healing in this community. If Mr. Hamill considered this to be a non-issue, we should have been instructed to leave the meeting and not endure sitting for 2 hours until they got to the agenda item he placed to defend our First Amendment right. I was forced to miss my pottery class that I had paid for and have been talking about forced to have my child sit through this for 2 hours to defend my rights. And as I stated by Mr. Williams from day one, having the gathering was within our First Amendment rights. And so we proceeded. Interestingly, there was never an apology. Rather, Mr. Hamill showed up to the vigil. When it was over and we were packing up, he turned to my 9-year-old daughter and said, "How did you like sitting through that meeting?" No remorse and no care. How do you say that to a 9-year-old? Needless to say, the event itself, it was beautiful. We sang, we honored, we came together as a community to honor Charlie Kirk, Jesus Christ and God. But it did not come without fear that something like this could hit with such resistance. As a woman of faith to defend her First Amendment right here in the town that I live in, where I call home and where my family calls home, I will never forget that. I wasn't going to come here, but I cannot be silent. Not after the complete display of bias that took place only a few weeks later. The No Kings protest took place October 18th, 2025 on Main Street. This group fell into the same amendment rights as we did. It was not scrutinized. They were not made to defend. They were not intimidated by borough officers with false information. No member of the No Kings protest endured 2 hours of sitting in this very room to defend their First Amendment right. Where members of this committee actively participated in this event that impeded traffic, that their Democratic headquarter volunteers were not intimidated by police officers of this very borough to stay inside or off of the sidewalk. Where profanity-stricken signs were on display for our children. This was met with open arms. I am disgusted that I'm living in a town where an event that was created to unite and to create peace, to bring joy in a time of need, was scrutinized, dissected, and interrogated. Where is the humanity? I ask for this clear bias to end. That everyone in this community, regardless of religious or political affiliation, should be treated equally, with respect and with compassion. Charlie Kirk was the truth seeker, no matter how hard and no matter how difficult. Charlie inspired me to have the strength and courage to stand here right now, to ask the hard questions and to seek the truth. Mayor and council leadership, I beg of you to seek the answers to who impeded on our First Amendment rights, who tried intimidation and scare tactics, who told Judy to push erroneous rules on us, like having to walk every 10 minutes or we would get dispersed or potentially cited, who ordered the police officer that came to the Republican committee to tell the volunteers they needed to stay inside and not be on the sidewalk during their vigil. Who told that officer that we needed a permit for the park? It is time to ask the hard questions, to get to the truth and hold accountability. Putting all these facts together over the last few weeks, this leads to one person that's sitting in this room today. Thank you.
Peter. Oh, yeah, Silent G like lasagna. For you. I don't know how I can follow that, I'm pretty powerful. But I just have a couple of things I'd like to add. First of all, just for the record, I did have some off the record conversations with the mayor about this matter. There seems to be a little bit of confusion about whether or not the No Kings protest required a permit or not. All right, if you go onto the county website, it tells you there that any event that's going to happen in the park, of which the Fred Miller Pavilion is part of, requires you to fill out the use form. But then when you go to the use form, it tells you if it's a First Amendment issue that you don't require a use form, which is perplexing to me because everything is a First Amendment issue, right? I mean, everything that we talk about is First Amendment issue. So it's kind of perplexing that the organizers are self-certified, which I think is ridiculous. The bottom line is that there should be a permit, and it's perfectly appropriate. Obviously, the permit would be granted because it's a First Amendment issue, but a permit, the town should review all uses of the park. And if it's a First Amendment issue, then they should obviously issue the permit, but one must be cognizant of the amount of people that are gonna get protest or the event and where it's located. Okay, in this particular instance, 535 people, I believe, according to the media, showed up at the front Fred Miller Pavilion across the street from the Republican headquarters and basically stood in place for 2 hours, except for about 20 minutes where they walked up and blocked crosswalk near the Democrat headquarters came back, but they were basically parked in the same place for 2 hours, banging on drums and utilizing a megaphone. No permit was issued. According to what we just heard from Jennifer, if it was an actual protest, they would have been required to move. No police officer required them to move. The current mayor and the candidate for mayor, who were both on the council, were both in attendance at that rally. And what I would say is it broke the law because, and I don't know if you're aware, but Honesdale has a noise ordinance, and the noise ordinance is pretty clear. It basically says, I'm gonna read it to you. I wanted to make sure that I got it right, so just give me a second. The noise ordinance says, no person within the borough shall willfully make or cause to be made any loud, boisterous, or unseemly noise or disturbance to the annoyance of any other person. Last time I checked, I was any other person, and I was forced to endure somebody banging on wood drums and yelling into a megaphone for 2 hours across the street of the Republican headquarters. Okay, I absolutely believe that this was not a protest within the meaning of the First Amendment that would, to peaceful assembly for the redress of grievances to your government. It was an attack on our laws and on a lot of the elderly volunteers that are there. Okay, there were 525 people. There should have been a request put in so that it would be permitted. The council should have looked at that request. They should have said, well, there's more than 25 people here, which is pretty much all that can fit under the Fred Miller Pavilion. That should have been moved to the park. Alternatively, the police should have made them march around town. And any member of the city, of the council or candidate for mayor that was there while this law breaking was going on should be sanctioned, in my opinion. Because it's clear, as during our correspondence, like Mayor said to me, well, I guess the police had bigger fish to fry. More appropriately, you control the police department. So if you're standing there with the protesters, whether banging on drums and you too, and banging on drums and with the megaphone, they're not going to come over and cite you. They're not going to try to move. And there were 525 people there, which was well outside the ability of the 2 police officers that we have in this town to control. So I think the council needs to take a really close look at this. This is not going to get better. Donald Trump has another 1,150 days or so of his presidency. Things are going to get really exciting yet next year. And I think that if you don't address this right now, there is going to be a problem.
Next person who has to speak.
Mr. President, I'd like to wait for the second citizen input, please.
The next person. And Kathy, etc.
Good evening, everyone. To quote previous speaker, I would start by saying, it's not going to get any better. Most of the motorists seem to think East Street is exactly like North Main. And they're dead wrong because North Main is a highway, leads out to the fairground, onto Rileyville, and Hancock at 35 miles an hour. Well, most of the people go 40 miles an hour on East Street. So I suggest if there's any means to call me to move this project forward, please call me. I'll have my number on that list there. The sign that says 25 miles an hour each direction. People will get killed with that speed.